Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and in this video I'm here to talk to you about the Lian Dynamic EVO XL. And this is a behind the scenes look at build video that I'm doing, and probably multiple other videos, because this is a really interesting case and I'm actually planning on building in it in a variety of different ways to show off what's possible so that I can create a review, but also various different setup guides, and I'll talk about more on that in a little while. But this is obviously an upgrade to the Dynamic EVO, which is a fantastic case and was my, or was/is, my main daily driver. So the main case that I use for my personal build when I'm not building other PCs, the one I use for video editing and gaming on. And this is obviously the XL version, which means it's bigger and theoretically better. It has a number of really interesting highlights to it, including obviously being XL, which means it has support for bigger things. So you can fit two 420mm radiators in there, for example. And you can do other things like the upright GPU bracket mounting, so you can put the GPU along the side, which I'm going to try and show at some point. And Lian Lee sent the upright GPU bracket and a riser cable along, which are additional purchases, so you can't do it as standard. But even so, pretty interesting highlight to it. I'm also going to do some crazy things like installing the Galahad 2 Trinity Performance model in there to start with the P20 fans, which means it's basically going to be quite a stealth build because it's black fans. And most people probably wouldn't do that. They'll probably end up with the Infinity fans or the SL120V2 fans or AL120s, whatever your preference is. So I'm probably going to rebuild that at some point in multiple different formats just to be able to show what you can do, and if you want to do an RGB build or if you want to do a stealth build. The other thing that's really interesting about this case is it has a design which allows you to change the positioning of the motherboard and the entire build, basically flip it around so that you can have the standard sort of traditional format, which would be where the PC sits on the right hand side of your monitor and the right hand side of your desk, and then you can see into it. But you can also change it around completely, basically moving everything to the other side, so that you can then have it on the left instead. So you can put it on the left hand side if you prefer, so that's pretty interesting. The motherboard tray is also adjustable, so you can put it up, down. It's a top, middle and bottom variants. Obviously adjusting that position gives you more room at the top for push-pull, and the bottom as well, so account for radiator size and things like that. So if you're doing a custom loop system, obviously that would be beneficial to give you more space there. It also comes with its own anti-sag bracket, which has been improved and changed, the positioning of that. So I'm going to try and work out how to put that in and show that. So I've basically got to unbox this, set it up, and then show the multitude of different things that you can do, which is going to be tricky because trying to build in it, then unbuilding it, rebuilding it in different ways, demonstrate what's possible in the different formats. I think that could be cool though. I think it'll be a good insight into what's possible with it. In theory, this is a pretty exciting case for a variety of reasons. There's loads of stuff. You could literally spend ages talking about it because it has other things too. For example, hot swap, HDD drive bays, and other things in there that you can change around. PSU positioning is adjustable. That's the thing with Lian Lee cases, is they're always highly customizable and adjustable, but there's also other small highlights. For example, they've removed the bar down the front, which was basically a support bracket, so there's now more glass visible in there, so that's going to be interesting to see. Visually it'll be more appealing than the original EVO. It also has some intricate things which you need to account for in your build process. For example, the front panel has 4 USB-A connections. Most motherboards don't have enough support for 4 USB-As. You only have 2 usually, so 2 usually goes into 1 port on the motherboard. There's not usually 2 ports on most motherboards unless you go for a really high-end motherboard or an E80X motherboard. Those sometimes have it, but the smaller ones or a standard ATX motherboard don't. I've only seen it like once, I think, maybe twice, where there's 2 front panel USB 3.2 connections, so you need a splitter cable. Luckily I have one, so I can demonstrate that. So I'm going to do that. So little things like that will be interesting highlights to this. So stick with me for those, and I'll try and cover them in this video and obviously in the other ones. I'm going to do a lot of other ones. I'm going to try and do a video dedicated to just how to flip it around to do it on the left side, because I think that'll be interesting. And then obviously also to show other things like the upright GPU mounting. As I said, I'm going to build it with the P20 fans this time, and then I'm also going to do SL120 V2s next week, which will be sometime next week in my world, but whenever. So if you want to see that, subscribe, because there'll be more RGB lighting going on in the near future. But there's some things coming that I can't talk about until next week, so see what that is. So here I've stripped down the case, and well, to some degree, one of the interesting things that I want to point out and I'd recommend thinking about is this is removable. You've got 4 screws here and then it will pop out. However, I did initially take it out and then immediately realised it was probably not a good idea to do until we finished the build. It obviously supports the top bracket, and what I found was I nearly bent that almost immediately, and that's not a criticism of the build quality, it's more of my incompetence. So I've put this back for now to make sure I don't do anything crazy like that to ruin it. There are a few points of interest straight away. Obviously, you'll see multiple points for cables to run through, so it should be easy to neaten things up a bit. Obviously, you usually have holes down here, but you don't usually have these rubber bits at the bottom. You usually only have them on the side. Everything is removable in a variety of ways as well. So every fan tray is removable. The rear one, the top, the bottom, the motherboard tray is removable. There's thumb screws for doing that, so that should be really easy. You can also adjust the position up here. So if you mount the motherboard in the lowest place, and this speaks to the modularity of the case as well, because it's just so flexible in terms of what you do. But if you move this motherboard tray to the bottom slot, you can then use 2 120mm fans at the rear here. As standard mounting positions, only one. The other thing of interest is this is obviously in the middle format. So as standard, this is the standard format in the middle. You can put it at the top or the bottom. And as I said, I wanted to try and show all 3 positions when I get a chance. And doing so gives you flexibility to have more. But you'll see there's quite a distance from the top already. If I put it in the bottom position, I'm thinking I might be able to do push-pull, but you might even be able to do push-pull without moving it down. That'd be interesting to see. Then you obviously have really long trays in terms of here. One of the other highlights this is you have the 120mm mounting positions, and obviously 140 is an option, and a radiator as well. But also you can use, they've got blanking plates, so that if you use 120mm fans, you don't end up with gaps at the top. Now the reason I mention this is because the original Dynamic XL, not the Evo version, but the Dynamic XL, which was one of my first Lian Li cases, very nice, that did have gaps, and there was nothing you could do about it. I ended up taking back plates out of the PCA brackets to use those because it neatened things up a bit. But there's a lot here, and it's gorgeous. The white version is really nice. As usual, really good solid build quality. Hefty. These cases are hefty, like pretty heavy. And when you build in them, they're even heavier. They always have been, but I don't think that's a problem. If I took the build quality of this versus some of the cases, it's just far superior. Now, I noticed this when I did like the H9 Elite from NZXT. People wanted to compare it with the Lian Li Dynamic EVO or variants of Lian Li's cases, and that was quick comparison from a lot of other people. I never actually did a versus video, although I was still thinking it might be worth doing that. But the build quality difference is the NZXT one's a lot lighter, but these are heavier, and I think that speaks to the build quality, the solid build quality of these. And that's one of the things I've always liked about them. It's just really well built, really solidly built. You're not going to bend them easily. You're not going to have any problems with that, but you do need a good solid desk because beefy, and some guns too. So make sure that you can lift. I mean, I don't know what the weight is, but it's pretty hefty. I should check the specs and find that out, but probably like 10, 15 kilograms unbuilt. Obviously put a graphics card and motherboard and power supply unit and multiple drives in there, and you're looking at a lot more weight. Other highlights that I've spotted. So there are hints from other Lian Li cases in here, one of which seems to be this door. So this tray reminds me of either the Lancool or 216, I can't remember which, but one of them had this, so you got a magnetic tray, whereas on the other Evo, it was screwed in place. So this is much more convenient if you need to access things. Just open that up. Obviously, as you can see, multiple SSD mounting points. You also have hard disk drive bays with hot swap at top and bottom, and then the PSU goes in here. There's loads of cabling to deal with, so that's going to be, obviously you have to demonstrate what all that does. And then just plenty of other highlights, plenty of room. Obviously there's an XL case, plenty of room for other things. You can mount, I think their demonstration for mounting like a controller is in here or in here. So you have these brackets, which as you can see, let me just take this out. In there, loosen that up a bit. And here we've obviously got a lot of front panel connections. But as you can see, you have this sort of bracket in there where a lot of the front panel connections go, and then you can run other cables into it as well. So you could get fan cables in here and such. It's just neaten that up, tidy things up. And as you can see there, that there's your hard disk drives. So you can access those in different ways, which is pretty interesting. So traditionally, the previous hot swap was from the rear. So you open it up, then you pull the trays out. But now you can take the side panel off and then you can just do this. And then you can just slide your things out once you've unlocked it. And they slot into the back. So you don't need to worry about plugging the cables in, because that's what all this is. So you've got the cables already sorted for you. You just got SATA power and then the data connections. And so that's hot swap, which means you can also RAID if you want to. I'm gonna have trouble demonstrating this because I don't actually have that many spare hard disk drives. I can show one, but it's a shame I haven't got a load of extra ones. So just slip out like that, pretty cool. So loads of flexibility. You can see if you take that, if we take this bay out, we'd have access to a lot more cables, and probably I will end up doing that, I think, at some point, because I'm not going to need 2 bays. I probably only need 1. And which one do you keep? I don't know. Is it neater to have things down here or up there? I don't know. But then you can obviously tuck a lot that way, and there's still a lot of space here. Obviously the power supply unit's going to be there, but it's quite deep. This bracket's also removable, so I'll be doing that. I'm probably mount an AIO here eventually, but I think I'm going to start with top mounting AIO, and just going to put some fans on here for now. But you can take that out. You have to just unscrew some bits, so I'll do that in a little while. Looking good so far though. This is the middle format positioning of the motherboard, so this is how it comes as standard. Look at the size of the gaps down here still. Even if you put fans down here, there's loads of space. So like standard format might actually be too much, I suppose. It's gonna be very roomy. Ideal if you're doing custom loop, obviously, or if you've got a radiator on the bottom, radiator at the top, which you would do with custom loop maybe. But just so it shows you how much room there is there in this format. Now set this up like this, and in a minute I'm gonna try the other positions because I wanna be able to demonstrate it with some different clips of what it'll look like and how to do it. But this already looks great, doesn't it? Just really roomy and easy to access. And this is the top position, and this was ridiculously easy to do. So in order to move the motherboard tray, I actually thought I was going to have to take the motherboard out, but you don't have to take the motherboard out, you can keep it in, which is nuts. So if you install the motherboard on the motherboard tray, all you've got to do is take this screw off, and then several down here. So there's like 2 up here, and then several in different positions down here. And then you just slide the tray out, and then there are 2 brackets, which is usually 1 up there and 1 down there, that you just reposition down the bottom into there. So it's essentially like PCIe brackets, but bigger ones. So they just slot in there, and now the motherboard's in the top position. As you can see, even more room down here, which is just, I mean, that's far too much for me. But I suppose if you're doing a vertical GPU mount here, imagine you have a lot more room lower down. Not even if you mount it there, you could obviously mount the bracket lower, and then you just have more space down the bottom here, which might enable you to do other things like make use of the other X16 brackets for expander cards, as I've done in the past, just to give you more space. Or if you're doing a custom loop system, or if you've got an E80X motherboard, it might just give you more room. I'm not going to use it in this position, but I wanted to get some clips to show what you could do. And just how easy what that was just brilliant. Like, it's so easy because it's just thumb screws and sliding it out. You don't have to pull the whole thing apart to do it. It was just ridiculous. And I think that's probably going to be the overall commentary on this case, is it's ridiculously well thought out and easy to build in, but we'll see. Stick with me for a full opinion, but look at that, brilliant, well pleased with that. So now I'm going to do it and put it in the bottom position. So I'm currently trying to set up the GPU anti-sag bracket because I want to demonstrate that. The setup of this is pretty interesting though. So what I wanted to demonstrate quickly is the way the graphics card's installed, even though like, small details are different to other cases. So if we turn this over, you'll see here, now these are usually got thumb screws in them, so like this. So I'm just going to put them in gently, but so these two brackets, what you can do, you unscrew these, and this is to remove the back plates from the PCIe brackets. So here, instead of traditional thumb screws, it has this panel on it. So you open this panel up, and then on the other side, then you go down here, we have the brackets as standard, but you have to lift them up and push them out. They're a bit sort of tricky to get out, but you can see they're held in just with this sort of hook system. Instead of, well, you normally have thumb screws or screws that you'd have to screw in down there, but instead they're just held in like that. And then these clips on the side basically secure that when you're finished. You can see it sits down over there like that. Pretty interesting. Another simple demonstration of a nice feature is the anti-sag bracket. So this is installed here onto the motherboard. All you need to do is swap out the standard motherboard screws with some standoffs, and then that screws in there. And then you have this adjustable bracket, which can be slid up and down by just pressing the button, so you can adjust it into position to secure your GPU in place. This will fit on ATX really easily, and E-ATX requires a little bit more installation. You have to have another back plate and stuff on there. It's a little bit more fiddly, but really easy. It's also been upgraded from previous anti-sag brackets to make it easier, but you can see fits nicely with this 3090 pretty easily. So one of the things I want to demonstrate about this is obviously this is in the bottom position, and just how much space there is might be hard to gauge. So here is a pile of four deep P20 fans, and look, that's actually possible. I mean, you wouldn't do this, but just to demonstrate just how much space there is up there. You can actually put four lots of fans on top of each other, and there's still space to the motherboard, which is just nuts. The other thing you can do with it in this position as well is you can mount two 120mm fans at the back like that. So those will go in there, which is pretty crazy. I might do that just to demonstrate it's possible. And put some fans up there too to show it as well. One of the other things I've noticed is in the specs in here, it says that you can fit, obviously, on the top tray, 320mm fans, 340mm fans, a 360mm radiator, or a 420mm radiator. But what I'm looking at here is enough room to mount four fans on, essentially. If you look at it like this, you can do it, which is interesting. So look, there's enough room. So if you wanted to, you could put four 120mm fans up here. Now, I will caveat that by saying it's clear that there isn't actually enough room to secure all the screws. But if you're the sort of person that wants to be a bit mad, then you can do this. So you wouldn't be able to secure the end screws at either end, but you could secure all of these on the top by the look of it. Just to demonstrate that's possible, I might actually do it. Just to show, because I always get asked crazy things like that. Can you do this? But you probably couldn't do that and then have the two fans here. They just wouldn't, I don't think that would work, because the holes would be blocked by the top fans. So you couldn't do this unless you didn't secure the back ones properly as well. You'd also end up, I mean, it wouldn't look amazing, but it might be possible. But I might just demonstrate both formats just to be able to show what you can do, because people will ask. So here it is, I've mounted four 120mm fans at the top there, and as predicted, you cannot fit this in there. You could only screw in the bottom fan, so the top fan would not be secured. I mean, if you're using uni fans like this, then theoretically you could do it. And it might not be an issue. Actually, I say you can screw in the top fan. You might be able to screw in the bottom part of the top fan. So you'll be able to secure all 4 points of this one and then 2 of those, but not the other ones. But if you're curious, you can't fit 4 120mm fans there. I've tried. It won't work. There's not enough length. You can obviously do this, but if you try and fit an extra one in, just to demonstrate that, I'm not making it up. There's another 4, right? It just won't go in the tray. You just can't get to that angle. There's just not enough room top to bottom to be able to do it. So you can't do that if you're thinking about it. But 320mm or 140mm, no problem. So here you can see I have installed the 2 fans at the rear. Again, only in the bottom position is this possible. And then 3 120mm fans at the top. There's a bit of a gap here, which is not ideal, but I'm planning on mounting a radiator up there. But something to think about perhaps, because if you do 320mm fans and only 1 120mm here in this position, because this top one probably wouldn't be there in most instances, you're going to have a gap. So maybe think about doing 4, even though the specs say you can't do it. It probably would look nicer if you don't like sort of gaps. Obviously I could reposition this, you could put it more that way, more this way. It's probably not even central, but I'm not too bothered about that right now because I'm not actually going to leave it like this. It shows you the possibilities of it. And as I said before, you can do push-pull as well probably, because it's another set of fans and then another one. I mean, I'm going to put a radiator between them and just do this in a little while. So there's loads of stuff going on here, loads of potential. Well, I've had to take these fans, put these fans in, take them back out again. So this is behind the scenes look at what I do. So I'm actually going to take these fans off again in a little while and put a radiator on there. But for now, I'm going to mount some fans here to demonstrate what you can do with that and with the back panel blanking plate and go through that. So here's another really small but awesome feature of the case design. This is the rear chamber, obviously, and I've mounted 320mm fans to the side panel. There's a gap at the top. This is what was present on the original Dynamic XL. And there's a gap there and to the bottom. But what they've done now is supplied these brackets, which are really easy to install. So you can just pop it in and it pushes into the clip there. Now I had to reposition the fans slightly, so it's something to bear in mind, because I had to push them down so there wasn't a gap. But if you look at the full picture, you can see you can actually put these on both sides. So I've done, probably it's going to be a personal taste thing, but like I've put the black one that way around and this bottom one the other way around, which I think is probably the better look actually. So there's 2 of these, so you can just put one down the bottom here, like, click that into place, and then you've got, obviously that's then filled up. This probably doesn't look as good, so I might just swap it around. But there's a pretty clean finish then, if you're only using 120mm fans. If you're using 140, you probably wouldn't have that issue. But it's really nice to have the inclusion of that as something simple to do. Oh, the other thing is you have options. So you could actually push all the fans down and put 2 brackets at the top, or push all the fans up and put the 2 brackets at the bottom. And so you have an option. You've got 3 different mounting positions and how to do that. I'm not going to demonstrate all of these things, but that is one way to do it. So something to think about with this case is the 4 USB-A front panel connectors. So I've taken the I/O panel out just to demonstrate the cabling. So these are the obviously USB-A connectors you'd use, USB 3.0, and they, as standard, will plug in on the right hand side, and they go in one way, this way. Now this is an ATX motherboard. This is a ROG AMD board, and there's no other port for this. Now sometimes if you're really lucky you might have an extra one. I've only seen it twice, I think. Once was on a MSI Meg Creation motherboard, which is really expensive, and another one was an EATX motherboard. But so then you can't plug this in. Now if you don't, and there's no accessories included in the box, which is one downside to this build. It's a shame they don't include one, frankly. considering the amount of other things they include. But so if you don't plug this in, you've only got 2 USB-A connectors on the front of your case. However, you can get splitters. So this is an optional accessory, which is a splitter cable. So essentially just puts those 2 connectors into one. It has the same sort of logic, so they plug in the same way. Look for that notch on the connector. They both plug in like that. And then this then plugs into the board. And there you've got all 4 connected up. Now this is a cheap splitter that I bought off Amazon. I'm not 100% sure whether it works or not. I'm going to check that. But there are big other options out there. And now theoretically you've got 4 USB-A connections. It's not the best looking, but you could probably just curl it down and hide it in the back of the case, and then hide the rest of the cables out the back as well. So that's something. The other thing they supply is you've got the standard HD audio connection, but there's also an extension lead which attaches to this if you need it. So with different positions of where you can put things, you can still reach the audio panel on the motherboard with ease with the extension lead that's included. So they've thought of some other things, but just not this. And they even note in the manual that there's no splitter included, but you can use a splitter. So additional purchase, but something to keep in mind if you're getting this case. So this is the left side format, which is a real pain to put together, I'll be honest. Probably more to my incompetence than anything else. But so the idea here is, and you probably have seen this upside down mount. Essentially the motherboard's upside down, the GPU will be upside down and other things. I'm going to demonstrate how to do this, but I probably wouldn't build like this. I think it looks weird and I'm not sure I like it. But anyway, in order to do it, what you have to do is take the bottom feet off. So first remove the fan tray from the bottom, remove the fan tray from the top, and then you flip the case over. You have to pull a clip. There's a clip at the back of the case which you pull, then you slide the tray out. Then you have to go to the top and take off a cover that's on the top of that. And then basically you put the feet on top of it, and then you put the thing, you're basically reversing the process, hence reverse mode. So this is what that looks like. This is now the feet are essentially on the top of the case as it came, and then the brackets on the top with the back there. And then obviously your bottom fan tray will go back in here, your top fan tray will go back in there. And then you just install as you normally would. Obviously I've put the motherboard in the bottom mode, and then I've flipped it, which is now not helpful because I was planning on doing push-pull on the radiator. I suppose I could see whether you can move the motherboard again. I probably could move the motherboard back down and then I might do it just to demonstrate how bonkers you can go with it. But the idea is this, that you could then put your PC, on the left side of your monitor and still be able to see into it. But I just don't like this upside down view, but that's a personal preference. So there you go, I can confirm you can mount it in the bottom position while also in reverse mode. So obviously now I've still got room for push-pull at the top. Single 120mm fan at the bottom. It just messes with my mind, it being this way up. I'm sure it does for a lot of people. And then obviously fans and the other sort of logic. I'm not keen on this. I'm probably not going to end up keeping it, but I am going to build it just to show what you can do and how it works and to find the problems along the way. I do like the design of it, and the flexibility, but having your motherboard upside down just looks weird. But if you like to have things on your left-hand side, then this is an option that you can do, and it's really flexible and it's relatively easy to do. It's taken me a while, but only because I'm recording it. What do you think? Would you do this? So in the best laid plans of mice and men, I was planning on using the P28s, the Unifans, these ones, as push-pull on here. But it looks like the fans that are included on the radiator are actually different. If you look, they're not the same. The fan blades, there's more fan blades on this standard fan than there are on the radiator. So I think these are, and these seem to be a little, maybe marginally thicker. They look beefier, and obviously just they're meant to be performance, but I was going to do push-pull, but I think that they're probably a different format in terms of airflow and things. I'm not 100% sure without looking at the stats, but I think that basically puts my plan out the window because I don't want to create a system that makes no sense. So as a bit of a bummer, because I was looking forward to doing that and showing off the capabilities of it. Maybe I could still do it though, just to demonstrate it's possible, if nothing else, briefly. but then say you probably shouldn't do this. I wouldn't mix and match fans. But this is the performance model of the Galahad 2, which has multiple things of interest. Obviously, this is performance design, so it's the best performing one in the group. So I did the previous two. There was a SL 120 one, I think, and a standard RGB one. But these have those. This one obviously doesn't have RGB, but it does have it on the cap, so you can pull the top off, twist the top off, and then you have the option to use this tiny little thing in the middle instead, which is the infinity mirror, and then you put this on top like that. So you've got this infinity mirror design, which I showed off with the other one, which was really nice looking, to be fair. Or you can take that off. It's a little bit fiddly, this system. And then you can use this one instead, which is meant to be dazzle mode, which basically just doesn't have any logo on it. There's no mirror, but it just has maximum RGB in the middle. Now, in theory, this should be the easiest of the system to sort out because the logic of it is fairly straightforward. The fan's already come pre-installed. It's already set up with an Intel bracket on the pump. And then you've got back plates. Thermal paste you have to apply yourself, which is a bummer, but then you've got a fan power connection to a 4-pin header on your motherboard, PWM controllable, and then you have some extra cables included in here. So there's this one, which is optional apparently, which is a connection straight to the pump that then has a fan power connector on it for some reason, which logically you'd think you'd connect these fans to it. The instructions say to connect the fans to a pump header, but I mean to a CPU header. Well, I'm thinking this would be more logical to connect the fans to the pump, surely, and then the pump to the AIO header. But this also has an RGB connector on it, so I suppose you could connect up other RGB devices. You then have this other one which comes from the pump head, which is a 5-volt RGB cable that runs to the 5-volt header on your motherboard. And then you've got more cables to deal with. USB connection for controlling via L-Connect, and then obviously AIO pump header and SATA power. So that looks pretty complicated, but in theory it's actually pretty straightforward. A lot more so than other things which actually have RGB on them. So yes, this has got RGB, but these haven't, so that makes it a little bit easier. It's also a bit of a chunky beast intentionally, so it's quite a thick radiator and thick fans, because it's meant to deliver the best cooling performance. So it's quite substantial, quite a substantial beast, which will be good because it will show what you can do with the EVO XL. So one of the interesting things about this for reverse mounting, and something to bear in mind if you're going to do it, is the cooler placement. So if we're top mounting the radiator, you kind of have to do it this way around with the tubes towards the back of the case, because if you do it the other way, with this Galahad cooler at least, is the 360mm, tube's just not going to reach too tight. Admittedly, I've got them at an angle, I've got them at a twisted angle, which you can do, so let me just adjust that. I don't think it's going to make any difference though. So you can see there's not enough room there. I'm thinking, like, maybe, yes, you can mount them this way, the other side, like so. But now I'm kind of blocking the graphics card port. I'm not sure about the implications of that. I am thinking about doing an upward GPU mounted anyway at some point in a minute, so that won't be too much of an issue. But look, this is a potential problem, so something to bear in mind. Another cool feature of this, so here is hot swap bays. So what you can do is obviously just unlock it, and then you basically have the ability to pull out both HDDs and SSDs, so you can put both in there, and there's obviously enough for 4 of these potentially, as well as the ability to mount multiple SSDs on the SSD tray. But the other thing you might have noticed is that there's a fan on here. Now, you have to have a thin fan that's 15 millimeters. So this is a Corsair fan because it's the only one I've got that's actually thin. Obviously your standard fan wouldn't fit. So for example, if you tried to use a Noctua fan, big chunky thing, it would sit too high and then the door wouldn't close. Pretty interesting. So if you want extra cooling, you could put a fan on both the hard disk drive cages. Some longer screws included in the package, and there's just two of them obviously, that allow you to mount extra fans on there, so you can put cooling fans on your hard disk drives if you're worried about your drives running hot. Pretty neat, another nice feature. The other really cool highlights I like is this, the cable tidying hooks can be removed, and you can see just how many different slots there are down here. So you can reposition the way you want to. Not only that, but you can also put them sideways. So they'll mount in both directions, which is obviously ideal for mounting your cables through. So if a PSU is going here and you want to run a 24-pin power cable, for example, through to the front and put it sideways, rather than trying to run it in an awkward position. You get a spare one of these included in the box as well, which means that you have three as standard, because there's one there and one there as standard, and then there's an extra one included in the box here. So you can have that, as well as obviously you've got another Velcro loop up there. So there's plenty of interest. For SSD mounting, you've got multiple different SSD points on this tray. So you've got 3 SSD points there. So in theory, you have 3 SSDs here, 2 more in there and 2 more in there. You could have a lot of storage in there, and then obviously fans on there as well if you wanted to. So masses of storage potential. Let's see how we get on with the actual cabling for power cable though. I'm probably going to end up removing these because I probably wouldn't use them, and that'll free up space for fan controllers, for example, and just more space for SSD trays. Here's a bit of a niche thing to consider. I'm using Corsair's RM Shift power supply unit here. Now, you might not well be doing this, but if you are planning on doing something crazy like that, you'll see that the hard disk drive tray at the bottom is going to stop that from working properly. So you can't actually mount because the cables are blocking. Now, obviously, a standard power supply will be fine because they'll come out here and go upwards. But in this instance, that's not going to work. But that's fine because I'm going to take the tray out anyway, so I'm going to demonstrate that. Now, this is a bit bonkers. So this is obviously the full sort of setup of the reverse build. And obviously the GPU is this way. Now, I don't think this is logical. And that's something to think about when building like this. Yes, it's possible, but just because it's possible doesn't mean you should do it. Because now a GPU is obviously pulling air this way, and the AIO is pulling it that way. So these two are now fighting each other, which is obviously not ideal. Now, you could obviously upright mount the GPU as another option, as an alternative, and even vertical mounting perhaps as well. But in this format, it looks quirky for sure. I don't think this is a good idea, and that's something to think about if you're doing the reverse build, is how do you do the airflow. So for example, you see if you look further down over here that I've now got 2 fans on the back. I've adjusted the position of the motherboard, obviously pushing it up, which now means I've got this massive gap at the bottom, which looks illogical, but that means that you can add 2 fans here. So then you've got 3 intake on the bottom and 2 intake there. So you've got a lot of cold air coming in. And also those side fans are also set to intake, which again, might be, I mean, that might be too much intake. And then I've just got the 3 on the rad that are exhausting. And then obviously the GPU. So there's quite a weird sort of airflow design. But what I wanted to show is sort of thinking about the logic of it, because traditionally you'd have, or traditionally I would set up with intake on the bottom and then exhaust on the top. But this area is usually obviously the top left, and that would usually be the exhaust. But it doesn't make sense to intake there and then exhaust here. That would be illogical. Obviously, cool air blowing onto the CPU cooler is going to be good, and onto the GPU as well. But then obviously that's going up, this is going down. There's a bit of a weird fight going on between the 2 sort of sources of air. But what I'm trying to do is demonstrate different ways of putting it together. So I'm going to, in a minute, take it apart again and swap all these fans out for Lian SL120, I think. And I'm probably going to swap the side-mounted fans for the upright GPU mount, just to show you what you can do there. Other thing to notice here is the tubes are really close to the GPU, and that back fan you can adjust the pipes on this one, luckily, so you can position them outwards. So although it's touching the plastic rather than metal, which is actually probably beneficial versus where it would normally be, or it would probably be sitting across some of the heat sinks. So this is quite good, but I mean, it's very tight. You can see it's very tight. And it's another thing to think about where the position of the motherboard is, like how long these tubes are, what the stretch on them is. If you adjust it down to get it further down, then that's going to cause some problems. I only put it up because I wanted to put the extra fan on, but maybe I could move it down a bit back to the middle position, and then the tubes would be all right. You'd have to lose one of the fans, but there's so much going on with this case, so much flexibility. One of the things I want to show here is the upright GPU mounting. So this was a faff, but you have options apparently, because you can install it up or down so that where the ports are can either be at the top or at the bottom, and there's different points along there as well, so account for the different sizes of GPUs. So you can see I've got it in this position, but one of the interesting highlights here is this. I've plugged in the two 8-pin PCIe power cables, and you'll see you can barely see them. Now, this is one of the things that's usually the most faff in any PC build, is trying to hide these cables away, in my experience. There's a tiny little hole here with the rubber grommets on it. It's perfect for threading those through. So that's probably the cleanest cabling I've ever seen on a build. And look down the bottom there, you can barely see anything. Just really neat. Downside is, in this setup, the way I've got it, obviously GPU cables are going to plug in up here, HDMI or DisplayPort, and then you've got to run them out. But you do have options because there's different places you can run them in. You're going to also have to obviously use a riser cable, which has been supplied as a 900mm riser cable here. You're going to have to run that from here to there, obviously, so it's going to be a bit of a faff. So it's a lot of faff, but it does look nice. There's no denying it looks nice in this position. Although I think it's slightly wonky for some reason, not quite sure why. So now you can see some interesting highlights of this design. The upright GPU mount looks really nice, I think. Obviously really tidy in terms of the PCIe cables, but you can barely see the lead, the vertical, the extension cable for the X16 cable. You see it runs on the left-hand side, right around the back, and then obviously up into the port. Actually, I just realised I put that in the wrong place. Lol. Better sort that out in a minute. Let's quickly do that now. There's not enough slack. Okay, so that's fixed. Doesn't look quite so good now. Probably could do tidying a little bit more, but obviously using a top slot gives you the fastest amount of lanes, so don't make that mistake that I just did. That's because my brain was still operating the other way around. I still find this a bit confusing with the sort of upside down motherboard. It just messes with my brain. But some interesting highlights there. Now the other thing you will notice is the DisplayPort cable is coming out the top of the GPU. You can do it the other way around, so the DisplayPort cables and HDMI cable come out at the bottom down here instead, so you can actually mount the bracket either way around, which is obviously be beneficial depending on the design you want to go for. And you can use longer setups, so you can mount the bracket in different points on the side tray as well. So depending on the length of your GPU, for example, you can access that. The interesting thing about it is the DisplayPort cable runs out the top, and then underneath the top housing, so you can actually put the lid on, and then you have it coming out the back here. The downside of this is, as you can see, it's really short. So unless your monitor's right next to your computer and is basically side mounting your display adapter, HDMI or DisplayPort, you're going to want to buy a longer cable because it's probably not going to reach. So it's something to consider, and that would indeed be a problem for me, definitely. So that's one downside to that if you are thinking about doing it. But otherwise, as you can see, it looks really nice. There's some interesting highlights. We've got a lot of space down the bottom here, so I'll probably move the motherboard down and adjust the position of that, because you don't really need that much space down the bottom. I only did it so I could show the two fans here. I think I'd probably get rid of one of those and shift it into the middle position, or even, as I showed, have it in the lower position, and you could do push-pull on the radiator if you wanted to. So there's so much flexibility here. So I am now going about an absolute mission. I want to show you the effort. I'm going to blow my own trumpet for a minute, or at least talk about the effort that I'm putting into these videos. This has taken a day. I'm on day 2 of building this PC in this way because I've done so many different formats, as you'll see from the clips. Obviously, standard sort of installation and moving the motherboard up and down and upright, vertical mounting, whatever else. I'm now taking out the Unifans, the P28s. I keep calling them P20s. I think they're P28s. It says P28 on the back. So apologies if you've noticed that. P28 performance fans. And I'm going to swap them out for SL120 V2s because that's probably what most people use. I know the SL120 V2s are very popular. So I'm going to put those in. But more than just swapping it out, I'm also going to put them on the radiator, and I'm going to swap the whole case back into the standard setup so I can get some sort of clips with basically one option and then a completely other option. So like this reverse build where it's on the left side of your PC, and then the standard build where it's on the right. And obviously, I mean, there's so many things. It's basically taken me 2 solid days to do this, and I'm not even finished yet. Because, you know, theoretically I could also show vertical GPU mounting. I don't think I'm going to do that because, well, one, my vertical GPU bracket's inside my Evo, my original Evo, and I'd have to take it out and put it in here, and then that means I can't edit videos. And 2, it's just a lot of effort. I think if I showed every possible variation of what you can do in here, it would probably just be a very long video. Usually I do a build video, and I'm thinking I probably will do that at some point, but maybe next week, because I want to concentrate on, I'm going to show off all the different features of this. And as you can see already, if you've got this far into the video, there's a lot of interesting things going on here, a lot of different possibilities in terms of where you put things, how many fans you put in there, the position of things, whether you do push-pull, where you put the motherboard, all the mounting of other things, then the clever little stuff like the cable hardening trays, the GPU brackets. There's just so much going on with this case. It's magnificent. But now I've got an absolute mission ahead of me because I've got to take out the radiator, all the fans. I mean, I've just taken off the bottom fans, but reverse the case back around the other way again, taking the feet off, changing the IO again, I get IO panels. It's just a lot to do. But hopefully it'll be worth it because then I'll get some awesome clips to show you. So this is what I was talking about with the DisplayPort cable. Coming out the top of the case, it's just running underneath this top bracket, which you can obviously take off, and you need to for putting it in reverse mode. Pretty cool that you have this option, and obviously also you can run it top or bottom, so you can run it out the top or you can run it out the bottom of the case depending on which way around you're putting it in. So there's plenty of different options there in terms of what you're doing and the setup of it. But this is actually the bottom of the case in the standard mode, so I'm just taking that back out again to set that up. One thing that's completely illogical to me, although perhaps you might want to tell me why I've done this, but with the IO panel, so the front IO, the USB, obviously standard format is usually installed at the front. You can have the option to also install it on the side if you want, which is kind of cool. But then you can also put it at the back. And I don't understand why you do that, because you've just got your motherboard connections at the back. Why would you want the front panel at the back? Is that something you'd be interested in? I mean, it seems weird to me, so I'm not going to do it. And I'm probably going to stick with it in the standard format, just because if you put it in the others, so if you put your front panel on the side like this, you have to try and work out how to get the cables into a... Well, you could probably do it. Maybe I will do it just so you can demo how. So the nice thing about this is the flexibility of the different mounting positions. It's just held in place with a clip there, so you can just clip it into the 3 different points. And as you can see, I did side mount it. And then you have a cable tidying clip that you can see here that just screws in, and so you can reposition that as well. And then obviously you can then just route those cables in. And as I said earlier in the video, there's also an HD audio extension lead included in here. So if you do find that doing this means your HD audio lead doesn't reach properly, then there's an additional extension there, so you can do that. I did find that I had to tidy these up a bit with cable ties because it was Just going to be a bit messy. Obviously, you don't want to block the fan tray while doing this either, so they get in the way of that. So it's worth neatening them up, even if they're going to be out of sight. But this then means that you've got a nice adjustable I/O, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to try and do push-pull with the SL120 V2s on the Performance Galahad cooler. I've been asked how you'd set up standard Infinity fans or uni fans with the RGB on this cooler, so I'm going to show that, but also how to do push-pull in a logical way, which should be fairly straightforward because the RGB can be controlled from the pump head or from the controller with a dual cable. So this is a standard cable which goes into the sync port and then CPU fan header. But I'm thinking what I might do is connect that up to the cooler pump. I don't know if you can run 6 fans off the pump, but there is a cable that comes out of it which has a 4-pin fan connection on it. So I'm thinking it will work. I'm going to try it and see how we go on. So in this instance, I've set the Galahad 2 Performance Edition with push-pull setup of SL120 V2s. And I've applied the same logic that I had before, and I forgot that I would move things around. So a few things to bear in mind is this is probably still going to work, but I'm now blocking the GPU, as you can see. So the tubes will be blocking the GPU in this position. Just quickly demonstrate if we can get these cables out of the way. So if it's pulled in like this, you can see that you can't see the top end of the GPU in that way. Doesn't look great, and performance-wise for the GPU is probably not ideal either. Now, I can shift the AIO that way probably, and you can also drop the GPU down because there's still other holes that it could get screwed into, so it could seat it further down, so I'll probably do both. Also, I'm kind of blocking the top of the motherboard, so I'm thinking about maybe I shift the motherboard down to the bottom rung to free up more space at the top. It shows how much you've got to think about what you're doing and how to do it. The good news is it's so easy to move the motherboard tray. I can basically establish where I want the AIO to sit, move the motherboard tray and then connect it all up, and I'm probably going to, as I said, drop the GPU down as well. And note that I haven't actually swapped the position of this, because where I had it in the reverse mode, it was DisplayPort cable was at the top of the case, and now it's at the bottom of the case because all I've done is flip the case over. So this is what it would look like in the other way. So you have the option of mounting everything in different positions, but just to bear in mind if you're doing push-pull, think about the tubes. Now obviously I could maybe mount the tubes on the other side. I could flip the rad round and have the tubes that end. That might be neater. I just don't know whether that will work, because that rear fan there might be a problem. And it still wouldn't solve the issue of the GPU not being visible. So here I've just test fit it by flipping it around the other way, which luckily you can obviously just do on the tray. I actually do think this is probably better this way around. If you look, we can mount the pump like a bit fiddly. Like that. And tidy the tubes up a bit. You can revolve the top of this pump as well, actually, so they do suggest that you could have it like this if you wanted to, but actually this will probably keep the tubes out of the way a bit more. And then I just need to sort the GPU out so it's not as blocked, and maybe plug in some of the cables, because it's going to be very difficult to negotiate that. I'm thinking about moving the motherboard down anyway, because it's still going to be, there's too much going on at the bottom, too much cable space. And I just think it would be better a bit lower, so I'm going to do all of that. The other thing that's interesting about this design here with the fan tray, so the radiator is mounted into the fan tray. What I found was when it was in a further back position, it was blocking some of the heat shielding on the motherboard, which I thought initially I was going to have to reposition it in the case. But what you can actually see is you have 2 lines. So yes, you've got 140mm mounting positions for different size radiators, but also 120 could just be pushed in here, so you can actually shift the radiator towards the front of the case more, thereby freeing up space. If you've got a radiator and a chunky motherboard and the two are colliding, this thing gives you a bit more room to play around with. As you can see, I've now managed to mount the motherboard lower. I've flipped the radiator around. There's some weird nonsense happening with the tubes, which I'm not happy about. I've got a bit of a crossover effect going on there. You could probably fix that by flipping the pump round and having the tubes come out the bottom instead. Also, these tubes are going to block the display, which is less than ideal. I've moved the GPU down a bit. It's still being blocked at the top, but it's now not as much of a problem. I do think actually it'd probably be better if you flipped it over the other way and had it exit in the top instead. I think you'd then be able to see more of it. But it's already going to depend on the GPU, your personal preference, the size of the thing and what you're doing. But it does look nice like that, I think. Where it goes to show the options again. Push-pull right at the top, 3 intake fans at the bottom, exhaust there. I probably don't have enough intake. There's only 3 intake and like 7 exhaust. 9 if you include the GPU fans. So that's something. So I'm not sure this is the best possible format. But it's something. And it shows the various different things that you can do. As you can see, there's a lot of different things that you can do with this case. It's insane, really. There's so many different things you can do in terms of building it. Now, I'm aware this has been a really long video, so I appreciate it if you've watched this far. And if you've enjoyed it, please help me out by giving it a like, subscribing, and dropping a comment down below. But what I wanted to do was to be able to show all the different formats of what you can do with the case, different positions for fans, AIOs, GPU, and all that other stuff. I am also going to follow up with some more videos soon on here, so I'm probably going to do a build guide, like a straight build guide on how you'd set it up with a basic sort of setup with a motherboard in standard position and GPU and just a standard AIO, just to show that. I also want to talk through a few other bits of interest about it, show different fan orientations and layouts. Now I'm thinking about putting the infinity fans in and showing what that looks like, maybe side mounting a radiator. So if there's anything you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. Maybe I can see if I can do that as well. Obviously some testing. I'd like to do a comparison video with the original Dynamic EVO and talk about the differences between it, because obviously the original EVO is a great case, also really modular, and you can do a lot of the same things. So the reverse build, for example. I just recently upgraded my EVO with air front panel, so the mesh front panel, which meant I could put more fans on it. So I'm now contemplating whether I move from the EVO to the XL, and if so, is that going to impact airflow? So there's lots of different questions there, but there's a lot of things going on here. Hopefully it'll be some good insights. Don't forget to check out the description for more information on the case and other parts, including the specs, where to buy, and other bits like that. And thanks very much for watching, and a big shout out to my YouTube members who help support the channel, and they get a special bonus of behind the scenes content, early access and things like that. So if that's something you'd like to see, or if you just like to help support me and my efforts, then please click that join button down below. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks very much for watching. Enjoy. And if you get the case, come back and let me know what you think and if any of this content's been helpful.